a beautiful day for baseball, and live from Camelback Ranch in Glendale, Arizona, it's the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Arizona Diamondbacks. It's the third game of the exhibition season. Hi again, everybody. Charlie Steiner, Rick Monday. Big story today. Kenta Maeda is going to make his Dodger debut in his career in Hiroshima over in Japan. 30 games over 500, a lifetime ERA of about 2.5, and a lot riding on his right shoulder and elbow.
And Charlie, that's over 8 years over in Japan and pitching for Hiroshima Carp. He's a young right-hander. Now, first you look and say, well, he's 6 foot, about 165 is what he's listed. I checked around with a couple of coaches and some catchers earlier this morning. One thing to do, 4 pitches, the fastball, the curveball. The curveball is going to be there, the slider, and the changeup. But here's the interesting thing. They said he's a lot like Zach Greinke. Now, Greinke's now with the Arizona Diamondbacks, but here's why. He cuts the ball, he moves the ball, he sinks the ball. One thing about it, he's got a very large contingent of media from Japan, and now we hope that the adrenaline, even though it's the first outing, a couple of innings, he may be trying to prove something. Fortunately for him, I think he understands he's not going to try and overthrow the ball.
Maeda is on the first year of an 8-year contract with the Dodgers. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have the lineups and first pitch. It's the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks. We're in the Valley of the Sun. It's a picture-perfect 78 degrees on this Saturday afternoon at Camelback Ranch. Dodgers and the D-backs. The Dodgers have just taken the field, and Kenta Maeda is about to throw his first warm-up tosses. First year of an 8-year contract, and there's been a lot of buzz around the Dodger camp this week, and especially today, an enormous amount of Japanese reporters here to chronicle every single move. And here's the lineup that he'll be facing this afternoon. Nick Ahmed will lead it off at shortstop for Arizona, and Jake Lamb will be the designated hitter. Phil Goslin at second base. David Peralta is in right. Ricky Weeks looking to hook on with the D-backs, starting in left field. Brandon Drury at third base. Chris Herman is the catcher. Kyle Jensen in the Dodger organization a year ago. Jason Bourgeois in center field batting ninth. This is far from the starting lineup that Chip Hale, in his second year as manager of the Arizona Diamondbacks, will be trotting out this year. And so here is the 27-year-old Maeda.
And for the young right-hander, he was actually the #1 pick by the Hiroshima Carp out of high school in Japan. He spent 1 year at the minor league level. And he is a controlled type of a pitcher. And again, as we were talking in the open of the broadcast, it could be an adrenaline situation, because I'm really reminded, Charlie, of when Hideo Nomo joined the Dodgers. That was at Dodger Town in Vero Beach, Florida. And for the moment that Hideo Nomo opened the door to his room at Dodger Town, there were pictures being taken. There were people that wanted interviews. And we're seeing that also kind of repeated here with Maeda.
You know, watching Maeda this morning as we were in the back area of the Dodger clubhouse, he did not appear to be the least bit out of sorts. He was very much in control. You look at body language, which means absolutely nothing until he starts throwing here this afternoon. But just the sense that I know that I got in watching him, it was another day at the office with maybe a little an asterisk.
This is basically a workout for him and a starting point, and the Dodgers are hoping it is indeed a very good starting point.
And so here we are. We're ready to go. And, of course, with the absence of Brett Anderson for the first 3 to 5 months, the responsibilities of Maeda increase accordingly. So here we go, and here's his first pitch as a Dodger. And he gets off on the right foot. So here's Nick Ahmed, and he's in a battle at shortstop. It's either going to be him or Segura. Gene Segura came over in a trade from Milwaukee. Or Segura could be starting at second base. Ahmed fouls it back to the right, and it's 0-2.
When you watch Maeda, you're going to be seeing a lot of different movement. I mentioned I used the comparison. Not a name that I brought up, Zach Greinke. Oddly enough, Greinke made his Diamondback debut yesterday. But he's going to move the ball around. He will tail it. He will cut it. The changeup, the slider, and the breaking ball on top of it.
And so on 0-2. Breaking ball down and away. 1 ball, 2 strikes. Ahmed, very fast runner. Just a terrific defensive shortstop. Question is, can he hit enough at the major league level? Last year against the Dodgers, he was all world. Here's the 1-2. And he pops it up into short right. That's Puig. And here's the Dodger defense with Puig in right, Corey Brown in center field, and Andre Ethier in left. And around the infield, Elian Herrera with a terrific play yesterday afternoon, starting at third base. Corey Seager making a second start of the spring. Kendrick and Gonzalez on the right side of the infield, and Yasmani Grandal behind the plate. So 1 out, 1 on, and we are just underway. Jake Lamb stepping in. Lamb, the designated hitter and likely the starting third baseman. Solid season last year. And a call strike, 0-1.
Second batter in the ball game, and we're seeing that the Dodgers have the shift put on against Lamb. And that really brings open another dimension of Dave Roberts, the new manager of the Dodgers. He said, look, we have to work on our defense. So many teams were out of position on cutoffs and relays when the shift had been applied.
Did he go around him?
Dodgers, in fact, we think back to the playoff series against the Mets, where after a shift had been put on, the Dodgers were caught flat-footed, a huge stolen base to an unoccupied bag from a defender. And for Dave Roberts, it has paid off already. They have gone over and over the defense with shifts.
Outside corner for a strike, 1-2. Well, 7 pitches in. Talk about a limited sample size. He is not overthrown. He seems to be very much in a routine. Maeda. And let's see what he does on the 1-2.
There is some resemblance to other pitchers from Japan that we have seen. I brought up Hideo Nomo's name, who did just a fantastic job when he was with the Dodgers. Opened a lot of eyes. And the Dodgers then made by leaps and bounds huge strides the Pacific Rim. But Maeda will come set and have that little pause at the top.
There's a lot of Hiroki Kuroda in Maeda. He's 27. He'll turn 28 next month. So he's in the prime of his career. And the 2-2. Well, pulls the string. Lamb is down on strikes, 2 out and nobody on. So Kenta Maeda, probably now third in the Dodger rotation.
Well, the career and the very low earned run average in that period of time, 2.39, and this season ago even better than that in winning 15 games. So the starting pitcher, if you look at a couple of years, outstanding seasons, and so far he has really been, I think, impressive from his standpoint, Charlie. We're talking about a language barrier. He does understand some English, but he has already improved the mechanics while he's been here in spring training a short time.
Phil Gosselin takes a strike. Well, again, limited sample size, but 11 pitches in. Been in control. He's not overthrown a pitch. There's the 0-1. Past a diving Elian Herrera into the left field corner. Gosselin arrives at second base with a double.
Well, Gosselin just going down and getting this ball. And Maeda, not a bad pitch, low and in. And Herrera not able to get that ball. The Diamondbacks, by the way, in their new sampling of uniforms, they have 8 different varieties and combinations. It reminds me, actually, in talking to a couple of guys in the Diamondbacks front office, that being Tony La Russa and Dave Stewart, about the Oakland A's when Charlie Finley had them. They posted on the board what combination and colors of uniforms that would be worn each and every day.
Here's David Peralta coming off a very solid season. And a runner goes, throw to third base, and out at third base. Yasmani Grandal cuts down Phil Gosselin. So Grandal, he's healthy this spring. He had a tough year last year in terms of the health. But he guns down Gosselin, and that is that. Somewhere back there is Dave Roberts. There he is. And this is his third game as the manager. And here's the lineup that he has put together, beginning with Howie Kendrick. And one of the questions about this Dodger team this year, who will be their leadoff hitter? It's Kendrick today. Yesterday, Crawford. To be followed by Ethier Puig. Adrian Gonzalez making his first start of the spring. Yasmani Grandal is the catcher. Corey Seager at short. Sean Zaraga, late addition to the lineup today. Alex Guerrero, left knees barking at him a bit. Elian Herrera's at third, and Corey Brown in center field. Against 25-year-old Shelby Miller, who delivers a strike. It is 0-1. Miller figures to be the number 2 starter in the D-backs rotation, of course, behind Zach Greinke. The one-loss record bears no resemblance to the kind of year that he really had. And there's Howie Kendrick banging a base hit into left field. Kendrick takes the turn and holds it first.
Kendrick so quick with the hands on the ball inside by Miller. But for Kendrick, he'll just clear out that front side, draw the hands in, and just inside the third base bag. Kendrick, by the way, this is the second time in the 3 games the Dodgers have played that he has been atop the lineup in that leadoff position.
It's been a while since the Dodgers have had a pure leadoff hitter, and I guess Rafael Furcal would be the last everyday leadoff hitter. Ethier, coming off a solid season last year. Puig on deck, Gonzalez to follow. Miller set at the belt. Last 3-4 years, the question around Andre Ethier has been, will he be here? He has always been a subject of trade rumors. Kendrick, the short lead at first. Of course, Andre has been with the Dodgers. Very first trade that Ned Colletti made was to get Andre Ethier.
Oddly enough, even though his name is much bandied about as far as the trade, last year you can make the argument he was probably the most consistent outfielder the Dodgers had, moving in different positions because of the necessity, filling in because of injuries. Crawford was injured. Jock Peterson struggled the second half. Yasiel Puig was injured over in right field.
Whacked into right field for a base hit. Kendrick is on his way to third. It's bobbled in right by Peralta. So the Dodgers have runners at the corners and nobody out here in the first.
So Ethier just coming on. With Andre last year, he also displayed, I think, much more, well, an even temperament as a hitter in hitting the ball to all fields. Howie Kendrick looking, seeing where the ball was, and then picking up. Chris Woodward, the new third base coach. Of course, the Dodgers with a lot of new coaches. George Lombard is over at first, and Woodward is over at second. So these coaches also, Charlie, have to understand, okay, which players can we say we're going to advance runners? Which guys can run? Just because you have speed does not necessarily dictate the fact that you could be a good base runner.
Players have to get to know the coaches, and just as importantly, the coaches have to get to know the players and what they're capable of doing and what they're not. Here's Yasiel Puig. Takes a strike, and it's 0-1. The enigmatic Mr. Puig.
He may be saying to himself, the enigmatic strike zone of Stu Sherwater behind home plate, the first pitch he sees in this ball game.
Puig last year, but 79 games with the Dodgers. With a .255 average, just 11 home runs. And that's well hit to center field. Bourgeois got a long way to go, and he will track it down. Ethier had crossed second base, and he will be safe at first. Sacrifice fly. Terrific play by Bourgeois to track down what turned out to be the sac fly. Kendrick comes in to score. Ethier just gets back to first base by a skosh.
Well, Howie Kendrick tagging up at third base, and for Bourgeois able to run this ball down. Ethier didn't think there was a chance to get it, but really with nobody out, it's a big gamble. So you went past the bag. You must retouch it on your way back, and just in there under the slide and the tag.
So the Dodgers take the 1-0 lead on the Puig sac fly. And here's Adrian Gonzalez playing his first game of the spring. Gonzalez, of course, has that chronic neck issue. Got a call strike, 0-1. He was supposed to play yesterday. And then at the last minute, Dave Roberts said, you know, forget about the drive to surprise and back. We'll start you tomorrow, and here he is.
Consistent numbers again as far as the production.
No balls and a strike.
The neck issue with Adrian Gonzalez, he says, look, I know how to handle it. Oh, yes, he gets a lot of medical advice and treatment, but bulging disc to the right side of the neck. It presents a problem for Adrian Gonzalez with that neck when it does go into spasm. In being able to turn to his right, he says, turning to my left and looking is okay. Turning to the right, a little bit difficult. Now, that's tough for a left-handed hitter.
Gonzalez will turn 34 in May in his 12th big league season. 2 balls and a strike to Adrian Gonzalez.
Again, this is only the 3rd game. We have already seen the presence of Dave Roberts. He's delivered a message. He wants this club to play aggressively. He wants this club to play better once they're on the bases. So look, we analyzed some numbers last year, what the Dodgers did and did not do once they were base runners. Because we can improve, we must improve.
On 2-1, Ethier the short lead at first. 3-1.
And by improving, it's tagging up, anticipating, picking up the coaches. They've had drill after drill after drill in the first couple of weeks. Even in batting practice. And rounding the bases, picking up the coaches, and everybody out there saying, yeah, well, every team does it. Well, this is a team now that maybe did not do it last year. They're starting off on the right foot this season in spring.
Gonzalez takes a walk, and Shelby Miller off to a rugged start. And so his catcher, Chris Herman's going to go out and try to settle him down.
Well, Miller, the numbers in 6 and 17, but that earned run average barely over 3. Well, there's a gentleman in the ballpark that understands about lack of run support, because Miller last year received 2.55 runs per 9 innings. Now, that's the lowest figure since Tom Candiotti. Now, the radio analyst for the Diamondbacks received in 1993. So there are not a whole lot of runs on the benefit side of Miller, even though he may have been pitching pretty well.
In 2013, Miller finished 3rd in the National League in the Rookie of the Year voting. As Grandal takes a strike, 0-1. Rookie of the Year in 2013 was Jose Fernandez. Yasiel Puig would finish 2nd, Miller 3rd. And here's Grandal last year, a tale of 2 seasons. Good start, and then injuries wore him down.
In the second half, he was injured. He did not make it public. The ball club knew exactly how injured he was, and he played as often as he physically could.
Seager's on deck, and the Dodgers was 1st and 2nd. Outside and low.
Dodgers in camp have also been working with the catchers. Grandal, in particular, A.J. Ellis and all the other backups, Austin Barnes, and we've seen him some action already, in framing, quote-unquote, framing pitches, working and receiving the ball better.
Strike at the knees, 1-2.
Steve Yeager, who works with the Dodgers during the season when the club is at home, occasionally travels with them under their tutelage, and many times here in spring training is the catchers. There's the first group of players here, and they're not afraid. They show up so early in the morning, they have to turn the lights on in the batting cages where they can work with the catchers.
The 1-2 to Grandal. Slicing foul and out of play. Grandal at the other end of the Matt Kemp deal. And then there's Shelby Miller talking about a big deal. The Diamondbacks invested heavily in their new right-hander, sending to Atlanta. Dansby Swanson, the shortstop, #1 pick in the draft, and Ender Inciarte, along with the right-handed pitcher Aaron Blair. On 1-2. 2 balls, 2 strikes.
And not only the prospect, but if you look at Ender Inciarte, he was one of the 4 Diamondback hitters in the top 10 in batting average in the National League last year.
Diamondbacks would finish the year 4 games under 500, but down the stretch, they got better as the season wore on. Dodgers would finish at 92-70. Arizona 79-83. Chip Hale has his team heading in the right direction. They would finish 13 under or behind the Dodgers last year. So now on 3-2 with one out. Ethier at second, Gonzalez at first. Do they go? No. Grandal, one hopper to first base. Kyle Jensen, the former Dodger, picks it up. Throws to Ahmed, then back to first base with Miller covering. So the Dodgers draw first blood. A Kendrick single, an Ethier single, and a long-distance sac fly for Puig. 1-0 after one. Fly ball to left field and deep and gone. A home run for Yasiel Puig.
Dodgers, Giants, tomorrow at noon on Sportsnet LA.
Big crowd at Camelback Ranch here in Glendale, Arizona. About a 15-20 minute drive from downtown Phoenix. It's the 8th season that the Dodgers have called Camelback Ranch home after all those many years in Vero Beach. So we're pretty near sold out on this Saturday afternoon as David Peralta steps in against Kenta Maeda. Maeda in his first inning gave up a hit, struck out a batter, 13 pitches, 10 strikes, and he is expected to throw 2 innings today. We'll also be seeing Jose De Leon, one of the Dodgers' highly prized pitching prospects. Peralta takes a strike, and it's 0-1. The emergence of Peralta last year, you were talking about Ender Inciarte, gave Arizona the opportunity to trade him away to get Shelby Miller. Peralta fouls it off.
Yeah, Peralta was another one of those, the four. He had 312 last year. Paul Goldschmidt hit 321. At A.J. Pollock at 315. Peralta at 312. Inciarte, as we mentioned, was at 303. So they had 4 guys in the top 10 in the National League. They didn't have any problem scoring runs. Defensively, up the middle, they were fine. But they had other improvements to make.
And they got themselves Greinke and Miller to beef up their rotation. And Patrick Corbin is now almost 2 years removed from Tommy John, and that's a pretty formidable front three for manager Chip Hale. On 1-2, and away, 2 balls and 2 strikes.
Yeah, the other problem, too, is that they had 17 rookies, the Diamondbacks did last year, that were up and playing.
Maeda has always been a good controlled pitcher in his 8 years in Japan. And it's rolled to the right side, and there's Gonzalez with the easy flip to Maeda cover.
Gonzalez makes that lead pass a little bit more unorthodox than maybe you see some first basemen. Some first basemen to get it and throw to the pitcher so they can have the ball and then have a step or two to find the bag. For Adrian Gonzalez, he has been almost flawless in taking the ball. Now watch the lead. Underhand toss. It's right to the bag. It's in a good location where the pitcher can see the ball, catch it, and then have no trouble at all in touching the bag.
The veteran Ricky Weeks looking to hang on. Swings and misses it. It's 0-1. Signed a minor league free agent contract about a week or so ago.
Well, if you're throwing Ricky Weeks fastballs, you're going to probably see a high percentage of swings.
Weeks last year in just 37 games in Seattle hit a .167. Had some good years in Milwaukee. The inside. In 2010, Weeks hit 29 home runs, knocked in 83, and hit .269. Yeah, just trying to hang on. Off to the right. Grandal will run out of room. Brandon Drury is on deck.
We gotta get that off there.
Diamondbacks did not bring very many of their primetime players over here today.
I'm just trying to protect
Pollock, their outstanding center fielder, and Goldschmidt, if there's a better all-around first baseman in the game, don't know who it is. He's not here either. It's spring. Did he go around? Nope. Adrian Johnson, the first base umpire.
Well, it's spring, and not just for hitters, pitchers, and fielders. It's spring for umpires.
He didn't just break his wrist, he shattered them. Elian Herrera. So quickly, 2 out and nobody on. Maeda has faced 5 batters now. Has a strikeout, gave up a hit in the first inning. But Goslin would be caught stealing by Yasmani Grandal. Here's Brandon Drury stepping in.
Well, the Diamondbacks like this young man. He can play second, he can play third.
Here's a breaking ball for a strike.
Yeah, that breaking ball now, there's some confidence that's going with it. And Drury might want to say, hey, wait a minute, this is only the first outing. You're not supposed to be breaking off a good bender right here.
Maeda's not going to overpower anybody. Nothing in 2. But he has 4 pitches.
So Grandal takes this one off the mask. The other thing with Yasmani Grandal on the catcher's mitt side, he has a little flap that comes down to protect his wrist from foul balls that may go back. You see it when he applies, when he puts up the target. And it just hangs down.
One ball, 2 strikes.
Somewhat reminiscent. You're wearing it off the glove. You think back years and years ago when Steve Yeager, I mentioned Yeager working with the catchers. He came up with the neck guard, the throat guard that came down and below the mask.
Just outside. And now the catchers, as you see with Grandal, the extended shoulder pads.
And the question is going to be, is anyone going to bring up a situation with the flap that is hanging down from the catcher's mitt? Does that fall within the specifications in the rule book?
Call strike 3. Kenta Maeda. How do you do? Again, he doesn't overpower anybody, but he's got natural movement on every pitch. Guarantee your tickets to opening day with the 2016 Los Angeles Dodgers mini plan. Choose from great promotional games, which feature fan favorites like bobbleheads and brand new retired number pins. Visit Dodgers.com/mini plans. So Kenta Maeda has done terrific work in his first 2 innings as a Dodger. 28 pitches, 19 strikes, a couple of strikeouts, and here is Corey Seager leading it off. Big rip, fouls it back, nothing in one.
Well, this young man did so many different things. We've heard his name over and over and over, and all the ball clubs who were attempting to make trades with the Dodgers had Corey Seager's name at the top of their wish list. Well, the Dodgers are not going to part with him. Big season with the average, and last year at .337. But more than that, the way he plays the game, he's able to slow it down, which is difficult for young players, and especially when they're called up to the big leagues, as Seager was last year. Ironically enough, he was called up after some injuries, and 2 days after he was called up, he made his major league debut because Jimmy Rollins got injured at shortstop.
And essentially down the stretch took the job from the veteran. To the left side of the infield, and Brandon Drury is there. First out of the second. Now, Sean Zaraga wasn't expected to start today. Alex Guerrero's left knee was barking at him, and so Zaraga.
You get hurt, it's your fault. I'm trying to help you.
Career minor leaguer. 6 feet, 254 pounds. He's from Aruba. And he bangs a base hit into center field. Last year at Oklahoma City at .303.
Yeah, he can hit, and he can hit the fastball. And he got one right there to his liking. Non-roster player. The leg kick hesitates in the air. The good thing is that Zaraga does not lunge at the ball. So many guys had a high leg kick, including last year, Jock Peterson, who has a different stance this year. Peterson does. The high leg kick has now been reduced to more of a stride versus a kick.
And here's Elian Herrera. Played at Colorado Springs last year with that .357 clip. And the veteran, really 4A player, takes a strike, nothing in one. Signed with the Dodgers back in 2003. Made his major league debut with the Dodgers in 2012. And up and down with Milwaukee 2014 and 15, and now back with the Dodgers. No balls and 2 strikes. In yesterday's game in Surprise, he made just a sensational sliding catch in front of the third base dugout. And most of the slide was on the cinder, the warning track, near the dugout.
Skid marks about 12 to 15 feet long.
Yeah, they surely were. Now Herrera asking for time from the home plate umpire. Short lead for Zaraga at first, not likely to go anywhere. And Herrera takes outside.
Yeah, if Zaraga's going to steal, you got yourself a story.
Shelby Miller, and more than likely his second and final inning of work. Dodgers have Chris Hatcher warming up in their bullpen.
All right, trying to get aboard. Miller, as we talked about earlier, the earned run average was not bad, but he broke a 24-game winless streak in his very final start of the season last year. A 2-seam fastball really kind of helped him a little bit more than that 4-seam fastball. It was 2 straight, got hit too often.
That's what I'm talking about.
Keep your head up at all times. So Shelby Miller is one of those classic examples where you don't necessarily judge a successful starting pitcher by a one-loss record. 6-17 last year with an ERA of 3.02. Into short right. And that's going to drop in for a base hit. So Herrera with a little parachute bleeder.
Got jammed just good enough where it could not reach the outfield.
Now Corey Brown stepping in. He's 30. Last time he played at the major league level was 2014, 3 games with the Red Sox. And he's had a couple of cups of coffee with the Washington Nationals over the years. 1 ball, no strikes. 6'1", 200 from Tampa. And played at Oklahoma State.
Great opportunity for young players. You've got a new manager. You have new coaches. So you can leave a mark in the way that you play, the way that you approach the game. And that's exactly the spot that Corey Brown finds himself in today, getting the start in center field.
First round pick of the Oakland A's back in 2007. Miller has not been particularly sharp in his first outing this spring.
That two-seam fastball has not really been anywhere around the strike zone where guys are going to offer, including the last one that was low and away.
So Brown sitting pretty on 3-0 with Kendrick on deck. 1 out in the second. 3 balls and a strike.
The hitter likes a count. It's right here.
Into right field for a base hit. Zaraga rounding third. He's on his way home. Throw to the plate. Not in time. Kicks off the glove of Herman. Arriving at second base, but not in time. Brown is thrown out. Zaraga comes in to score. And the Dodgers take a 2-0 lead.
Well, Miller was not behind the plate to begin with. Brown goes down and gets the fastball. Zaraga just continued to run as he's waved around by Chris Woodward, the Dodgers' new third base coach. The throw is offline. You can see Miller bottom of your screen. He was nowhere near the line that the throw was coming in, but a good throw down to second base to get the runner Brown.
So Brown with the hit and the RBI will be gunned down at third. That's Herrera, or at second base. Here's Herrera at third talking with Chris Woodward, Dodgers' new third base coach. Howie Kendrick with 2 out and a run in here in the second. There's a breaking ball for a strike.
We saw Howie Kendrick last year. Now, we had seen him play. And primarily when the Dodgers had played the Angels during regular season matchup or in the Freeway Series. But we didn't really fully appreciate Howie Kendrick until we saw him on a daily basis last year.
Chris Herman takes a licking.
I remember it was, I think in August, did an interview, a pregame interview with Howie, and I said, I want to tell you right up front, I owe you an apology. He goes, why? I said, I overlooked the fact of how good a player and how consistent you have been. He was a delight. He is a team player. He answers the bell when he can play.
Over 290 in his career. And to the right side, where Goslin picks it up and throws him out. But the Dodgers come up with 2 runs and 3 base hits. They leave 1, lead 2-0 through 2.
But Dodgers may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form, and the accounts and descriptions of the game may not be disseminated without the express written consent of the Dodgers.
Kenta Maeda's Dodger debut went very well. No runs and a hit in 2 innings, 2 strikeouts. And now he's going to throw another inning in the bullpen just to keep it going. Again, nothing overpowering. But he had the Diamondback hitters off balance.
Good control, worked both sides of the plate. Good breaking ball. That was strike 3 right there. So a good outing indeed. Your first appearance in North America, and he will continue his workout along with his interpreter in the bullpen.
So he'll throw another 15 pitches or so, maybe 20, and call it a day. This is Chris Herman leading it off against Chris Hatcher. As we go to the 3rd inning, Dodgers 2 runs and 5 hits. Hatcher delivers a strike. It is 0-1.
Boy, Hatcher was terrific when you come down to the close of the season. Spent 2 months on the disabled list because of oblique problems. But he went scoreless relief in 12 of his last 13 games to finish out 2015.
No balls and 2 strikes.
So the ERA in that period of time for Hatcher was below 1. He allowed a 158 batting average, and Chris Herman now is trying to figure it out, but Herman didn't have a chance to figure much out when he hit below $150.
With the Twins last year, Hatcher, 6'1", 200, lives in Council Bluffs, Iowa.
Just watching Herman hitting 140 plus. He's got a lot of movement in his hands just to begin his approach to hit the ball. Starts with him high, but watch, he'll drop him.
2 balls and 2 strikes. Chris Hatcher. Began his career, as most Dodger fans know, as a catcher, but his throwing arm was simply too good. And he strikes out Herman. First out of the 3rd.
Yeah, a note on Hatcher, too, starting out as a catcher. You have to go back to the Boston Braves, 1935. Art Dahl, according to Elias Sports Bureau, was the last player to start your career as a catcher at the big leagues in the following season, make it to the big league level as a pitcher. So that's quite an accomplishment. This is 1935.
Of course, Kenley Jansen began his career as a catcher and was the catcher for the Netherlands team in the World Baseball Classic, and would eventually come around to be one of the great closers in the game. This is Kyle Jensen. Dodgers had him in camp last year. Big burly first baseman. Did not go around us. The umpires between innings are going from one base to the next. So they're getting their spring training work in. Adrian Johnson, who had been the first base umpire the first couple of innings, he's over at third now. And it's a foul ball. So Hatcher will get an inning of work today. We'll also see Luis Avilan. Jamie Wright is back. Chris Anderson and Jose De Leon. Young and old alike today. 3-2. Kyle Jensen from Northern California. At Oklahoma City last year, 20 home runs and 71 runs batted in. 6'3" and 240. And Hatcher gives up the walk.
Sets up in situation 2. The new rule in baseball. It's a double play situation right here, but the new rule involving 7.09. on what a runner can and cannot do. Re-emphasizing again, you cannot go outside the baseline. You have to be able to make contact with the bag. You also have to begin the slide before coming to the bag, not after.
The speedy Jason Bourgeois fouls it off. It is becoming known as the Utley rule, much like and there it is.
There it is. Slide prior to reaching the base, or you can touch the base. Do not change your pathway to go out of your way to annihilate an infielder, second baseman, or a shortstop.
So that's the Utley rule, and of course we have the Buster Posey rule about what catchers can and cannot do around the plate, what runners can and cannot do coming into the plate.
And for Utley, it was the slide. Obviously, every game is critical in postseason. It was against the Mets at the time. It was a 2-1 game. And Tejada was a shortstop, and for Utley going to the bag.
Runner goes, and there's a line drive base hit headed toward the left field corner. Jensen will score. And holding at second base is Bourgeois. The Diamondbacks have a run on the board. It's 2-1 Dodgers.
And a long run for Jensen for first base. A ball hit down the line. Ethier comes over to get at the Dodgers again about the defense. And it was a much improved defense last year. But just looking at, everyone was in the correct position. And Jensen will go back into the dugout and ask for some oxygen. Getting that play last year, too. With Chase Utley going to the second base bag, he was reading, and the only thing you can do as a runner is to read what the fielder is doing. And Tejada was still attempting to come across the bag, still attempting to make the throw to first base. And that's when Utley took out Tejada. Wasn't trying to break his leg, but that's what happened.
Nick Ahmed takes one under the knees. Ahmed from East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, right on the border with northern Connecticut.
Well, he's one of the top defenders at shortstop last year. Diamondbacks were very strong up the middle.
They hope he can hit enough. Last year, 226. But as a defender, and he's got great speed. They hope he can be the guy. They got Gene Segura in the deal from Milwaukee. And there's Chris Owings. So they're musical chairs, and they're three guys in two positions. To the right side, Gonzalez runs well out of room.
Now, there's so many numbers you throw at people, and what are the numbers defensively? Well, you can look at errors, you can look at opportunities, chances. For Nick Ahmed, the numbers were kind of put down by BaseballReference.com. And he was one of the top defenders at shortstop, and by the numbers of Baseball Reference, he reduced the runs scored against the Diamondbacks by at least 20 runs as a result of good defense.
He killed the Dodgers whenever they played. And the pickoff attempt goes into center field, and Bourgeois will go to third. On the throwing error by Hatcher.
So a spin. Kendrick comes over, and just a bad throw.
And so the infield comes in to settle the nerves of Hatcher.
Well, game situation, it kind of changes things now, because with one out, he's got a ground ball. Unless the Dodgers are going to play the infield in, doubtful at this spot in the game, at least to the right side of the infield, although they are going to come in, try and shut down that run.
They might not do it ordinarily during the regular season, but this is a perfectly
great opportunity to go ahead, and this is what it's called about, practice.
A long run for Corey Brown. Tagging and scoring is Bourgeois. Ahmed with the sac fly, and the Diamondbacks have tied it at 2.
And Arizona, Chip Hale, their manager, is very happy with Nick Ahmed. That infield in, trying to keep the ball off the ground, did. And hit it far enough where the run can score easily.
And so we're tied at 2. And Jake Lamb is stepping in. In 107 games with the Diamondbacks last year, 263. In the 19 games between these two clubs last year, the Dodgers 13-6. Dodgers beat the Diamondbacks 8 out of 10 at Dodger Stadium. Big rip. And coming up empty. Lamb is out of Seattle. And a 6th round pick 4 years ago. Hatcher misses high. And it's 2-1.
Diamondbacks last year, offense, they were 7th. Batting average at .264. Runs 8th.
Luis Avilan will be the next Dodger pitcher. He's warming up in the bullpen now. And so Kenta Maeda's extra work in the bullpen has been completed.
Well, the numbers are good offensively for the Diamondbacks. Runs scored, and also from the defensive standpoint, touched upon that. Earned run average, not that good. 16th.
Dodgers and the Giants tomorrow from Scottsdale. We'll have a simulcast for you. There's a call, strike 3, and that will end the inning. So Hatcher gives up 2 runs, 1 of them earned. Arizona scores 2, and we're tied at 2 after 2.5. Tickets to opening day with the 2016 Dodgers mini plan. Visit Dodger Stadium today from 10 to 4. Make your purchase and take your photo with the 88 World Series trophy. Visit Dodgers.com/open house. Shelby Miller's day is done, and he's been replaced by Yohan Lopez. Spent the entire year last season at Double-A Mobile. 10 games, 9 starts, 1 up and 6 down. And in the D-League, Arizona Fall League, he had himself a win there too. Well, the first pitch to Ethier. 1 gone.
One advantage of playing in Mobile in the summer, as a player, you don't have to take a lot of time to get loose.
Yeah, it doesn't take long to warm up.
The air is a little bit close.
Well, here's Yasiel Puig with a long-distance sac fly to center in his first at-bat. Boy, the Dodgers are hoping that he can return to the form of his rookie year. Last year, injury-plagued, and seemingly nothing went right. But if he can be the Puig that we saw a couple of years back and be right there in the middle of the lineup, the offense takes a whole different look. Remember when Puig came up June 3rd, 2013, and he just took Major League Baseball by storm. Those throws, the grand slam. In 104 games, he did .319 with 19 home runs and 42 runs batted in. But last year, with injuries and everything else, just 79 games and hit .255. And beaten on the slider.
Breaking ball is going around. The other thing about Puig, he came into camp much, well, in better condition than what he reported to camp last year. And many were questioning, is it maybe the lack of conditioning? Did that help lead to leg problems that he had?
Well, conditioning has never been an issue for Adrian Gonzalez. He can make book on the fact that he'll play about 150-something games every year. And his offseason regimen is in the boxing ring. Not that he's getting hit around or hitting anybody, but between the heavy bag, the speed bag, and all the cardio work, Gonzalez, you can see, has got himself a new frame this year.
Well, a new frame and the upper body strength, in particular with your arms. As you're hitting the bag, carrying the gloves, putting your hands up.
Two balls and 1 strike to Adrian Gonzalez.
When you see Adrian Gonzalez also as a hitter, from a hitter standpoint, it's a nice compliment where you say, well, he's never in a hurry to hit the ball. What does that mean? Well, he does not jump at the ball. He does not normally swing at bad pitches or borderline pitches until there are 2 strikes.
There's a breaking ball for a strike, 2-2. Gonzalez played in 156 games last year. Since 2006, when he was with the Padres, he hasn't played less than 156 games in any season. Career .290. And he can make book. He's going to hit 25 to 30 home runs and knock in about 100 runs.
Yeah, physically and fundamentally sound. But the other thing, too, is your bat begins well before you get to home plate. Adrian Gonzalez is always watching pitchers. But they having trouble with breaking balls at this point. They're starting to throw the off-speed pitch at one point.
Right to the second baseman, Phil Goslin. And a 1-2-3 inning for Yohan Lopez. We'll go to the 4th. Luis Avilan, the next Dodger pitcher. He's on his way in. Fourth inning, the Dodgers' third pitcher of the afternoon, beginning his warm-up tosses, Luis Avilan. Came over from the Braves in that big deal at the end of July. Hector Oliveira, Paco Rodriguez, and Zach Bird would go to Atlanta. The Dodgers would get back Alex Wood, now part of the rotation. Jim Johnson, now gone. Jose Peraza, now gone. Bronson Arroyo, now gone. But Avilan, when coming over to the Dodgers last year, 23 appearances in his career, has a .296 earned run average. Out of Venezuela.
Really at his best when he came in and runners were on base, because he just allowed a minuscule batting average against him. It seemed he got better whenever he was called in and people were on base.
And so you've got Avilan, and of course J.P. Howell had a great year last year. Avilan will be facing Phil Goslin. Dodgers also made a defensive alteration over at first base. Bellinger has come in, and he is somebody to keep a close eye on. Cody Bellinger at first base. Got Rancho last year, .264, but the scouts are raving about him. I think he's a year or two away, but I think there's a lot of upside. .64, about .215. Fourth round pick Bellinger was a couple of years back. So we'll be back with you tomorrow at 12:05 LA time. Dodgers and the Giants. Zach Lee and Jeff Samardzija will be coming to you from Scottsdale. 2 balls, 2 strikes.
What are the differences between these two ball clubs last year in the Western Division? The record against the West. The Dodgers went 46-30. And for Arizona, 39-37. Chip Hale addressed that a couple of months ago in the offseason. You analyze it, you have to play much better than what they were able to accomplish within your own division.
Well, the Dodgers last year were able to fatten up on the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, and the Padres on their way to a 92-win season. Dodgers 13-6 against Arizona.
Goslin hanging tough. He's another one of the guys on the Diamondbacks. He can play 3 different positions in the infield. He can also play left field.
But Avilan beats him. Both Avilan and Goslin, former Atlanta Braves. That's the first out of the 4th inning. And David Peralta coming up. Peralta bounced to first in his first at-bat. Into left field. Drifting on over is Ethier.
Boy, how good is it to have baseball? Good weather, big crowd.
And there is just enough of a cloud cover that the sun
For a
is
little
not
protection where it's interesting. And Thursday, the first game the Dodgers played, it was bright sunshine, and fans around, and not just those in the seats, those being waved in front of their faces.
A comfortable 78 degrees at game time. With 2 out, nobody on, Ricky Weeks. Weeks just signed on with the Diamondbacks a couple of weeks ago. Looking to hang on. Like everywhere else in baseball, time waits for no one. Ricky is 33, 11 years in the bigs. Last year hit but a $167 in Seattle. After 9 years in Milwaukee. Well hit to right. Puig has a long way to go. Off the wall, bobbled by Puig, and Weeks is on his way to third base. Well, that wasn't very pretty from beginning to end, was it?
Ricky Weeks, I mentioned in the first at bat, he can hit a fastball, and he's going to commence the hacking, and there's a fastball out over the plate. Yasiel Puig tried to reach up and grab it immediately. And from an outfielder's standpoint, you know, well, it's already going to be a double. Then he dropped it again and then missed. Not just the double cutoff, but also lined up was Luis Avalon. So 3 cutoff men were missed.
Two out, and that allows Brandon Drury to step into the plate with a runner at third base. Drury took a called third strike in his first at bat. If you're just joining us, so far the story of the day, Kenta Maeda's Dodger debut, and he was just terrific. No runs and a hit in 2 innings. 37 pitches, 22 strikes, and he struck out 2. Up high.
Let's make that a double and an E9, allowing the runner out there. Double and E9 allows the runner.
And they score it correctly. That is a double and an error on Puig. And it went off his glove the first time, but then when he tried to pick it up with the bare hand, dropped it again and then missed the 3 cutoff men.
Well, it was either with his hand or his arm.
Well, remember the game when Puig first came up? And again, you were talking about he did everything when he was called up. And he did it. And said, oh, my goodness. But there was one game, and he has a tremendous arm. He did not really understand the theory of cutoff men. In one game, he missed 9 cutoff men.
In its own way, a perfect game.
Yeah. And then he'll throw somebody out from deep right field, throw him out at third base.
He had that one play in his rookie year. Game-ending double play at first base. He made the catch against the wall in right. Whoa.
Incredible talent.
Two balls, 2 strikes to Brandon Drury. And down on strikes, Avalon gets him. 2 strikeouts for Luis Avalon. No runs, 1 hit, 1 error, 1 left. After 3.5, we're knotted at 2. Head to the home half of the fourth inning. Yasmani Grandal, Corey Seager, and Sean Zaraga will bat. Mentioned that we'll be in Scottsdale tomorrow, and Zach Lee will be pitching, and he certainly trying to elbow his way into the rotation. What with the long sideline injury to Brett Anderson. Bolsinger did well yesterday. Grandal bounced into a double play in his first at-bat.
Dave Roberts has some decisions to make along with his coaching staff. But with Bolsinger pitching yesterday, and the curveball is really his bread and butter. But he changes speeds exceptionally well. Had a good job, so his first outing was good. Everyone trying to make sure that you can build upon one day after the next.
And Bolsinger was a very pleasant surprise last year for the Dodgers. They really picked him up for a song and a dance from Arizona. Carlos Frias, his name is mentioned in there. Later this afternoon, we're going to see Jose De Leon. There's a hard line drive caught by Phil Goslin. Well, Grandal today bounced into the double play in his first at-bat. It was a rifle shot to first. And now he lines a rifle shot to second.
So you're 0 for 2, and you've got 2 hang with them. A couple of attaboys, and from a hitter standpoint, you know you did your job. Also, Goslin did his job at second base. Barely out of the box. That's how hard the ball was hit. So he's hit it right on the button twice and nothing to show for it.
And Corey Seager, who popped to third in his first at-bat. No balls and a strike.
Seager, like most young players, when he came up last year, people on the other side, they knew about him. They had heard about him. Knew about his brother also. But they tried different things. They tried to pitch him in. They tried to pitch him away. They went with the off-speed pitches. They went with the breaking balls. And every time that we saw, Seager was making adjustments, which is something for a younger player because it's a learning process, sometimes very painful learning process at that.
Corey's just going to turn 22 next month.
Had a good look right before that pitch, too. He chokes up like an inch and a half on the bat. Does not get down at the end. And then we saw him time after time when he has 2 strikes is making sure that he can make better contact.
Call third strike. Yohan Lopez in his second inning of relief has retired all 5 batters he has faced to this point.
And Lopez defected out of Cuba. And the Diamondbacks signed him to a sizable contract this offseason.
And here's Sean Zaraga, a last-minute addition to the lineup today. Alex Guerrero's left knee was too painful to play. And it's so early in spring, no sense in pushing it. Zaraga, quite a journey for him. Born in Aruba, graduated high school in Florida. And was a 44th round pick of the Brewers back in 2007. Digging a hole deep in the box. He lined a single into center field and scored a run in his first at-bat.
Up on the toe, that front foot kind of closed the stance. What drives you nuts as a hitter is if you have a guy that's hitting in front of you that maybe digs a hole and it's maybe right next to where you want to be. Because remember, you can go all the way back on that line where he's standing right now. If you're in contact with the line, you're still considered in the box.
Easy play at second base for Goslin. And Yohan Lopez retires all 6 batters he faces. We'll go to the 5th. Dodgers and D-backs are tied at 2. Jamie Wright's on his way in. celebrating a birthday, Dodger Stadium is the perfect place to bring your special group. You'll receive great savings and share Dodger memories together. Group tickets start as low as $11. Visit Dodgers.com/groups. Old Man River, Jamie Wright, who did not pitch last year. Started with Texas, didn't work out there, and then basically nobody called, sat it out. And during the offseason, he was playing catch with his neighbor from a couple of miles down the road, a fellow named Clayton Kershaw. And he still felt like he could throw the ball pretty well. And Kershaw agreed, and Wright is back. Jamie Wright is 41 years old, or about a year younger than his manager.
He's a big guy, 6'6" to begin with. The Rockies' #1 pick back in 1993, high school in Oklahoma. And Dave Robertson Company, Rick Honeycutt, the pitching coach, was seated to the far left in the Dodger dugout. Jamie Wright, one of those delightful people where you talk about. He is very forthright. He is very humble. And he says he still has some gas in the tank.
Wright was with the Dodgers in 2012 and 2014. And did not pitch at the major league level at all last year. Let go by the Rangers in spring and into short center field where Corey Brown is there. So Chris Herman breaks his bat and flies to center, and Wright gets his first man.
And after a year's layoff, it's not too bad. The first hit that you face, you saw him off. There's a broken bat. The first out is retired. Whoops, what happened? Started as a bat, ended up as a kitchen knife.
Now here's Kyle Jensen, one-time Dodger. Jamie Wright turned pro in 1993. Made his major league debut in 1996. From Colorado to Milwaukee to St. Louis, back to Milwaukee to Kansas City, back to Colorado to San Francisco to Texas, Kansas City, Cleveland, Seattle, Los Angeles, Tampa, and the Dodgers. Twice. And 2 years ago was the first time he had signed a guaranteed contract to come into spring training in about a dozen years. So he has always had to sing for his supper in spring.
In the major leagues, over 19 seasons, he has pitched in 719 games.
There hasn't been much he hasn't seen over the course of his career, and there's a breaking ball for a call, strike 3.
Wow. So you take a year off, and you're in your 40s, and you come up with a breaking ball like this. Starts inside, comes back and gets the corner. Hello and goodbye.
And he's one of those guys, as you mentioned, he's so easy to root for. Underneath that Nike blue shirt is the rattiest, grayest University of Oklahoma t-shirt. It's about 12 years old. A lot of players have their own particular idiosyncrasy.
You know what it tells me also? He didn't play last year, right? He could find the shirt, though, to come back.
Mm-hmm.
He knew exactly where it was.
I mean, there are more holes than fabric. 2 balls and no strikes. Jason Bourgeois is the hitter. And there is Seager getting the speedy Bourgeois. And Jamie Wright is perfect in his inning of work. Jose De Leon is warming up for the Dodgers. He'll be pitching next. looking at Andrew Chafin, about to be the third Diamondback pitcher of the afternoon. Solid year last year. Opponents hit merely .207 against him and had an ERA of 2 3/4. So this is going to be his second season. And among Major League left-handed relievers last year, Chafin was second in innings, sixth in ERA, eighth in strikeouts. And left-handed hitters hit just 182 against him.
Yeah, did a good job as a setup man. He actually came into spring training last year with an outside chance to be in the starting rotation. But they liked him out of the pen, and he lived up to that billing.
Yohan Lopez went 2 for Chip Hale, and he was perfect, struck out 2. So as we enter the bottom of the 5th, Elian Herrera leading it off. Herrera singled to center in his first at-bat. Corey Brown on deck. And I suspect that we'll see Howie Kendrick, and then more than likely Kendrick's day will be done. First week to 10 days, you want to get the regulars 2 or 3 at-bats. Jensen runs out of room. Meanwhile, Jamie Wright. 1 inning, 9 pitches, 6 strikes. Father Time apparently is looking the other way at the moment. Herrera, of course, came up with the Dodgers. Spent the last year or 2 in Milwaukee and back in the Dodger organization, looking to hook on.
Elian Herrera, if you need a position filled, he can fill it.
Signed with the Dodgers back in 2003. Switch hitter. And down on strikes.
Yeah, good slider by Chafin. Chafin, when he came out of high school, how are you going to complete your high school career? Well, he did it by pitching a no-hitter. Exclamation mark added to that. But again, out of the bullpen, that slider can be devastating. And he's not afraid to throw it to left-handers or right-handers. And a fastball, hitters will tell you it actually gets on them a little bit more quickly than they were anticipating.
Chafin from Ohio. Fires a fastball for a strike. 6'2", 2 1/4. He'll turn 26 in the middle of June.
And likes to throw the changeup at times to right-handed batters, and when he gets ahead of them.
The Ohio native went to Kent State. And he had himself Tommy John surgery about 5 years ago. Patrick Corbin, a couple of years removed from Tommy John, is going to be a very important cog in the rotation for manager Chip Hale. Today's starter for the Diamondbacks, Shelby Miller, 2 innings, 2 runs and 5 hits, and a rather nondescript performance. Into left field, deep, and against the wall. Socrates Brito just inserted into the game. Crashes into the wall and makes a terrific catch.
Well, he got back. At first, it looked like he was going to be fooled a little bit. He turned to his left to begin with. To go back, he knew where he was. He glances over the right shoulder again, says, nope, I need to reverse the track. Turns around, excellent catch, holds on to it, hitting the wall.
Socrates Brito, who came in to replace Ricky Weeks makes a terrific catch. 2 out, nobody on, and here is Howie Kendrick stepping in. Kendrick 1 for 2 and a run scored today. 2 runs, 5 hits for the Dodgers. 2 runs, 3 hits, Arizona. Up the middle and behind short. Behind second base, the shortstop Ahmed picks it up and throws him out. Nothing across for the Dodgers. Jose De Leon is coming in. He'll be fun to watch when we come back for the 6th. In 13, Jose De Leon was a 24th round pick of the Dodgers, but he has quickly worked his way near to the top. Last year in 23 minor league appearances, all starts, an ERA of under 3, and opponents hit barely over 200 against him. And he is one of many outstanding prospects for the Dodgers. Right now, the Dodgers are considered to have the #1 minor league system. And Corey Seager, of course, is the #1 prospect, period. We'll get to see Julio Urias before long. You're about to see De Leon. Maeda at 27 is kind of hard to call him a prospect, but he is listed as such. And Cody Bellinger, who came in last inning, is also another highly prized prospect. So now we're going to see De Leon for the first time. And he promptly gives up a double to Nick Ahmed. The new left fielder for the Dodgers is Trace Thompson, and he makes the overthrow. Ahmed is aboard with a double. Talking to De Leon the other day, 6'2", 190. 3 years ago, he was 6'2" and 230. Took off a ton of weight, reshaped his body. Has those long, lean legs.
And he can drive off the legs. He's been clocked as high as 96 in a fastball.
Jake Lamb is the hitter. He was struck out twice today. Once by Maeda and once by Chris Hatcher. And leading off second base is Nick Ahmed, the Yukon Husky. 0-2 to Lamb.
When you look at the delivery also by De Leon, there's some hitters that say that they have difficulty picking up the ball. And just watching it from our vantage point behind home plate up here in the press box. Left-handed hitter, you don't really see it come out. It's kind of a peekaboo around the front shoulder as he drives it towards home plate.
On 0-2.
As the late arm movement just at the very last second and whips the ball around the shoulders.
And he's one of those guys, you hear the term, the ball comes out easily from his hand. Two balls and 2 strikes.
So from a hitter standpoint, if you're at home plate, see when the first time you pick up the ball coming around the body. There's a little late action with his arm.
Two and two, and Lamb is done.
Oh, good off-speed pitch. So you throw the gas, it's registered at 96, topped out there. You're looking for it, trying to find the ball, and then all of a sudden, throws a badminton bird up there, the changeup.
First out of the 6th inning, and Phil Goslin is coming up.
You know, you're a young player, and you throw the ball hard, and you have a changeup like that, you got a pretty good start.
It's a long season, 162 games in 181 days. And would not be surprised at all to see, before the year is out, De Leon and Urias somewhere in the rotation. Breaking camp, not likely. De Leon will turn 24 in August. He's from Puerto Rico.
One thing I noticed also about De Leon, I had heard a report that he had moved last year to the third base side of the pitcher's slab. Well, here he is. He's on the first base side.
1-1 to Goslin inside.
And people may ask, well, what difference does it make? Well, if you start to look, depending upon how you throw and your release point, if it's right-handed batter, left-handed batter, you can hit the front corner of the plate and having it going away. But he had moved to the third base side of the pitching slab last year, but he has gone back to the first base side here.
New catcher for the Dodgers is Austin Barnes. So Grandal's day is done. Yasmani hit the ball on the screws a couple of times and had nothing to show for his efforts.
Well, Barnes had to come to the ball game. With Ethier leaving the game, that did not leave an Arizona State Sun Devil in the lineup. So Barnes had to come in.
But
Yes, a plug for ASU.
But there's one in the booth. They were retiring your number there, huh?
Oh, they.
Whoops.
That's the second time today that there has been an error on a pickoff. Chris Hatcher did it in the third inning.
And the third error of the day for the Dodgers.
Now, they retired the number a number of years ago at Arizona State.
And were they going to have a little patch on their uniforms?
They're going to have a patch this year. Over the flag incident. They given me a call and very happy to hear about it. Going to meet with Coach and have lunch in a couple of days.
Brandon Hicks, the second baseman now. The Dodgers have brought the infield in, but De Leon will strike out Goslin. The infield can retreat, and there's 2 out.
Boy, they're just good movement. De Leon, he gets the movement right there with just gas.
So De Leon, first pitch, he gives up a double to Ahmed. Not rattled. He strikes out Lamb. Then he makes an error, throwing error, and rebounds by striking out Goslin.
De Leon drives the ball. I mean, he stands 6'2". He has the legs of a 7-footer. So if he uses the drive on the legs, it's going to be right there. No wonder he can throw the ball in the mid to upper 90s.
Missing outside. So Maeda, 2 solid innings in his Dodger debut. Blocked nicely by Austin Barnes.
Boy, it had to be blocked too, because Ahmed was coming down that line. He was anticipating getting away from the Dodger catcher. Boy, there's the jump he was anticipating. Boy, you're at third base, on base anyway, and you see the ball in the dirt. Be looking for it. Terrific stop by Barnes. That's just gas. I mean, you look at hitters and you say, wait a minute, look at the reaction of some of the hitters. You get the feeling that the ball's getting there much more rapidly than they're anticipating.
On 2-2. Missing outside and high. 3 balls and 2 strikes.
Good pitch right there. Peralta is not going to buy it.
Over the course of a couple of years, De Leon shed more than 30 pounds. And he strikes out the side. David Peralta down on strikes. Welcome Jose De Leon to the Dodgers. He strikes out Jake Lamb, Phil Goslin, and David Peralta. The Diamondbacks leave a runner at third. Is live with the MLB.com at-bat app. Stay connected all spring with radio broadcasts, video highlights, stats, news, and more. Download MLB.com at-bat, the #1 app for live baseball on your smartphone and tablet. Well, the Diamondbacks are now beginning to empty the bench, and you're looking at Daniel Lopez. Andrew Chafin retired the Dodgers in order in the 5th. Lopez in 53 appearances, down on the farm, an ERA of $1.50, and opposing hitters hit under 200 against him.
Many times you come into the ballpark, you'll hear a vendor say you may not know the players without a scorecard. We're in that phase of the game.
We have reached that portion of our program. Oh, and Chip Hale has. Might as well start singing "Getting to Know You." And soon enough we will. Trace Thompson leads it off his first at bat. He came in and replaced Andre Ethier. Boy, talk about athletic blue blood. Clay with the Warriors. Michael Thompson, of course. His great NBA career. And there's a lot to like in watching young Mr. Thompson the first few days.
And what we've seen so far offensively and defensively has been a pleasant sight, quite frankly. A couple of scouts have talked about it before. We've seen diving stops at the outfield. Thompson also has some power, has some pretty quick hands.
2 balls and a strike. And he's banged a base hit into the left field corner off the sidewall. Thompson has great speed, arriving at second base easily. He's got those long, graceful strides.
He just runs easily. He gets his ball low and in, but watch the strides, and then he goes around the first base bag. I mean, he's looked like he's a sprinter running the 220 or the 400. I mean, it comes effortlessly.
Austin Barnes, his first at-bat of the day. Tied at 2 in the bottom of the 6th. Daniel Gibson is the new pitcher for Arizona. Two balls and no strikes to Austin Barnes.
Barnes more of a contact hitter. He really made improvements last year behind the plate. We saw it pay off already the last half inning where he blocked that ball, runner at third.
And he can play some infield as well.
But here's a spot too, is that the count was 2-0. He went kind of going long ball. But we got to play situations. You have a tie game, your first at bat, 6th inning, you're trying to impress some people. A spot hit the ball to the right side, advance the runner.
Three balls and a strike.
A lot of young players fall into the trap of saying, I have to do everything in order to impress someone if I'm trying to work my way up the ladder. You will impress them much more rapidly if you do the things accurately according to what the game plans call for. So if you move the runner over, you're going to get high fives in the entire dugout.
He said he takes a walk.
And he'll get a high five from first base coach George Lombard, who'll say, hey, nice going, kid.
And now making his way to the plate is Cody Bellinger. Another highly prized prospect of the Dodgers. As of not quite 3 o'clock in the afternoon on March the 5th, 2016, Bellinger, a couple of years down the road, is thought to be the heir apparent at first base for Adrian Gonzalez. Well, it's going to have to happen between now and then, but Dodgers see him as their potential future first baseman.
Well, he's a local product to begin with. He's out of Chandler, Arizona. Good size, 6'4". He's going to grow into his body a little bit more, but the Dodgers' number 4 pick, 2013, and you see the big numbers, 30 home runs, 103 runs batted in.
His dad played with the Yankees, Clay Bellinger, and has a couple of World Series appearances to show for his efforts. Out at first base, a nicely turned 3-6-1 double play.
The Diamondbacks needing a big play. They get it. Nicely turned over by Arias, who's in at first base. Close play back at the bag.
Now here's Alex Hassan stepping in. Into left field, and it's a fair ball. It's going to roll to the corner. In to score is Thompson. Hassan arrives at second base with a double, and the Dodgers take a 3-2 lead.
Second double of the inning. Hassan chokes up on the bat, gets the ball that he likes.
Big crowd watching this game this afternoon. 13,122. A sellout. Of course, a large Dodger fan base here in the Valley of the Sun and the Arizona Diamondbacks. This is their sphere of influence. 8th year at Camelback Ranch. This is Rob Segedin. Came out of the Yankee system. And Sean Zaraga on deck. Dodgers 3 runs and 7 hits. D-backs 2 runs and 4.
Segedin, another one of the big guys. 6'3", 220. Out of Tulane.
Takes inside.
Saw Segedin the other day swinging the bat, and it did a very good job. In particular, the ball that was in on him, which a lot of young hitters have difficulty with that pitch, especially if there's some pretty good giddy up on it.
Down and away. 3-2. Segedin out of New Jersey. And as Mo mentioned, went to Tulane. Well hit to left. If it's fair, it is gone. It is fair, and it is gone. A home run. That was a rifle shot, wasn't it?
He's strong. When analyzing and talking about his hitting style, he says, I am aggressively patient. It's the yin and yang of hitting, but Segedin hit that ball. That was a rocket. Segedin came close to stumbling around the first base bag trying to peek himself. Well, I mentioned the ball in, handled it well the other day. Handles this one well on top of it. That's a rocket.
And it's a 3-run lead as Sean Zaraga steps in. And a base hit into center field. So Zaraga 2 for 3. Couple of singles to center this afternoon. Remember Ronald Torreyes, the little fella that the Dodgers got late last year? He would be traded to the Yankees along with a left-handed pitcher by the name of Tyler Olson. for Rob Segedin. And this is Charlie Culberson stepping in. He fouls it off to the right.
Spring training. You cannot make the team in one day. Can you miss making the team in one day? For the younger players, they try and go in fast forward. And for the veteran players, they know that they have, well, 30 practice games to get ready for a very long season.
Culberson came up with the Giants in 2012. Then a couple of cups of coffee with the Rockies. Georgia born and bred. 26.
Well, his dad, Charlie, was also drafted by the Giants.
Never made it to the bigs.
1984, an outfielder.
But the kid did. Dodger first baseman at the moment. Cody Bellinger, the son of Clay Bellinger. Two balls, two strikes, two outs. Off the foot.
Well, he comes from a pretty good bloodline, not only his dad. His extended family related to George Sisler, former All-Star Dick Sisler, and ex-big league pitcher Dave Sisler. His grandfather, Leon Culberson, spent 6 years in the big leagues with Boston and Washington back in the 1940s.
Fists it foul and out of play.
But regardless of who you're related to, when you get jammed like that, it's self-defense.
From the Sisler family, there were some pretty good players. Oh, that one's rocketed toward the left field corner, and it's a fair ball. Let's see if Zaraga's going to make it home. He's on its way, and here's the throw, and he is safe. Charlie Culberson with a line drive double into the left field corner. Zaraga comes around to score the fourth run of the inning, and the Dodgers lead 6-2.
Culberson gets a pitch, handles it very well for the second time this afternoon. Zaraga comes around and scores. Well, he knows where the oxygen is located in the dugout. But for Culberson, much better swing. And Zaraga, yeah, it's an uphill battle when you see the runner leaning back to try and go forward.
Chip Hale is going to take Gibson out of his misery.
And the outfielders are saying you could have done it a couple of batters ago.
We're going to take a break. Dodgers with 4 still hitting in the bottom of the 6th, leading 6-2. New pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Caleb Flack is the new pitcher.
Caleb Todd Flack out of Altoona, Pennsylvania. Non-drafted free agent 5 years ago. He was at Reno in the PCL last year in 42 games.
Not going to give him any flack. So the Dodgers with 4 here in the bottom of the 6th. Culberson, a line drive double into the left field corner, scoring Sean Zaraga after Rob Segedin hit a 2-run home run. So the Dodgers flexing their muscles. And Corey Brown, who's 1 for 2, steps in. Brown is the 8th batter of the inning. Dodgers had 10 hits yesterday, 12 hits on Thursday, and they've got 6 runs and 10 hits this afternoon. And Daniel Gibson, it's one of those days where he'd rather stay in bed. Two balls and a strike. Dodgers and the Giants tomorrow, and we'll be on the air. First pitch, 1:05. It'll be a simulcast. Brown bounces to short, and that's going to end the inning. So Culberson knocks in a run with a double, and Rob Segedin hit a line drive home run in a big 6th inning for the Dodgers. $1,122 fans enjoying this game on this beautiful Saturday afternoon in the desert. Game time temperature 78, just enough cloud cover so that folks can stay as cool as possible. And Socrates Brito leads off and takes outside. 1 ball, no strikes. Of course, the Dodgers have the legendary scout Mike Brito. We see him at Dodger Stadium at every game. Panama hat in hand and head. And he has a new nickname, Socrates, in honor of this fella.
Well, the Diamondbacks like Socrates. Pretty good outfielder. Already made a catch in today's game after he came in. But 15 triples, 20 stolen bases last year. Hit just 33 at-bats in the big leagues last year.
Bangs a base hit into left field.
In those 33 at-bats, he had over 300 at the big league level, but all the other numbers were at the minor leagues. So he has some speed. He has some power.
This is Carlos Rivera stepping into the batter's box now. His first at-bat of the day.
Now the Dodgers have all kinds of defensive changes. Segedin is at third, Culberson at short, Hicks at second. Rico Noel's taken over in center. And we know those players are in those positions, and some of the defensive changes. We have an open line to immediate family members when they call in, and that's how we identify some of them.
Brito with the lead off first. So the outfield has Trace Thompson in left, Rico Noel in center, Alex Hassan in right. You're looking at Clay Bellinger at first, Brandon Hicks at second, Culberson at short, Segedin at third, Austin Barnes behind the plate. This is one of those games where your best serve scoring with pencil. Had a good eraser. As Carlos Rivera fouls it back. That's home plate umpire Stu Torbert. Clearwater. Rivera, 6'3", 230. He's out of Venezuela. And has 4 major league games under his belt, and that was with the Red Sox a few years back. Well, the Diamondbacks left most of their primetime players back a talking stick today. Goldschmidt, Pollock, Segura, Castillo, and Rivera down on strikes. That's the 4th strikeout for De Leon in his second inning of work.
A Southern California product, Brett Hayes, who's out of Pasadena, coming on his first at bat. He was originally a number 2 pick by the Marlins out of University of Nevada.
Hayes is 32. So he's been kicking around. Signed with the Marlins in 2005.
His dad, Tim, we're not going to have bloodlines with some of the other players. His dad, Tim, was drafted by the Royals at one time, did not sign. And his great-grandfather, also named Tim, once played with the Indians organization.
No relation to Gappy?
It is that stage of the game, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yep. The first week of the season, by the way, if you're watching games, you learn just what a wonderful invention computers are.
We did a game 10, 12 years ago back in Vera. They put somebody in. The guy didn't even exist on Google.
No.
I thought, ooh, we got a long way.
He was
to go.
part of the witness protection program. He happened to decide he wanted to play baseball that day.
You know, we hit enter and Google responded, we don't know either. On 0-2, Hayes, one hop to short. There's 1 and 2. Nicely turned, Culberson, Hicks to Bellinger. No runs and a hit, and another solid inning for De Leon in his Dodger debut. Arizona's new pitcher is Braden Shipley, who pitched at Mobile last year as a starter. 9-11 and an ERA of 3.5. Fourth season in the Diamondback organization. Went to school at Nevada, Reno.
Yeah, the Diamondbacks like him, and what we understand has an outstanding changeup. It's only in college that he became a full-time pitcher. He's also a position player, so still learning the craft. Not that you always have the total knowledge that you want anyway. But he is a guy that is on the radar for Arizona. 3-pitch mix. But again, the changeup is really kind of a bread and butter pitch, but he has to get ahead in order to use it.
And the Diamondbacks have made a host of defensive changes, which we will attend to soon enough. Once we figure out who they are.
Google keeps rejecting that offer, too.
Yeah, when he comes back and says, are you kidding? Well, we have the outfield figured out. This is Brandon Hicks, gets his knees buckled, and is 1-1. Six runs, 10 hits for the Dodgers, 2 runs and 5 for Arizona. Now 3-1 to Hicks. The outfield for Arizona has Zach Bornstein in left. Socrates Brito, who is in left, moves to center, and Gabriel Guerrero is in right. But as they say on those late night commercials, but wait, there's more. As Hicks works out a leadoff walk. there is one recognizable defensive replacement for Arizona. It's at first base. Joaquin Arias, former Giant. Trace Thompson doubled and scored a run in his first at-bat of the afternoon. 1 ball and no strikes. Thompson takes a strike. 1 ball, 1 strike. Dodgers open the season for real on Monday, April the 4th in San Diego. A 3-game series with the Padres and 4 in San Francisco. The home opener is Tuesday, April the 12th against these Diamondbacks. And of course, it's all preceded by the Freeway Series. March 31st, April 1st and 2nd. The first 2 of the games at Dodger Stadium. And the final spring training game in Anaheim. Thompson with a fly ball to center field. Back goes Brito. Way back there. So Thompson's hit the ball on the button twice today.
It's been impressive in the way that he just handles himself. I mentioned earlier, very quick bat of what we have seen so far. I haven't seen a whole lot of breaking balls thrown to him. I imagine as we continue on in spring training, pitchers get sharper and they'll mix in the breaking stuff. We'll find out, get a better look.
Now Austin Barnes stepping in. Barnes batting in the 3 spot where Yasiel Puig had 2 plate appearances today. A sac fly in the first inning, and Puig would strike out in the 3rd. Dodgers had never trailed in this game. They scored a run in the first, a run in the second. D-backs would score 2 in the top half of the 3rd. The Dodgers with 4 in the home half of the 6th. But to this point, the headline story of the day, the debut of Kenta Maeda. No runs, 1 hit in 2 innings, 2 strikeouts, no walks. And Jose De Leon has turned in 2 solid innings today in his Dodger debut. Struck out 4 in 2 innings. 28 pitches and 20 for strikes for De Leon. Is it my imagination, or is this game slowed down a bit?
Oh no, there's no illusion to this. Arizona did not bring a lot of players, but it appears that every one of them that was on the bus is going to be in the game.
And by a look of their dugout, every one of them's already on the bus. Ain't nobody in there.
Big coaching staff, though.
There's got to be somebody somewhere.
Coaches and 1 police officer at the end of the dugout. Everybody else they're either out of the game or they're hiding.
The Dodgers, on the other hand, they're hanging over the railing. Barnes takes a walk. And now the new Diamondback pitching coach Mike Butcher, of course, Southern California fans familiar with him, longtime pitching coach in Anaheim.
Diamondbacks have made a lot of additions.
New hitting coach Dave Magadan.
Mm-hmm. Tony La Russa, the president of baseball operations, a former teammate way back. Had a chat with him, and also Dave Stewart, the general manager. Went over and talked to them, and like most people of other organizations, they hold a few things close to the vest.
Really?
A lot of how you doings. That's about it.
It's just the nature of the business. Cody Bellinger bounced into a double play in his first at-bat. You may remember his dad, Clay Bellinger, with the Yankees. And Cody whistles a line drive base hit into right. Dodgers now with the bases loaded and nobody out. You know, one of the great things about the game and what it is that we do, and you hear from scouts about, watch this kid Bellinger. Heard that last year. They were eyeing him and looking down the road. And they think he's got a chance to be special.
And when you hear from scouts, you know, they don't have an axe to grind with analyzing players. If you ask a question, unless they're holding something close to the vest themselves, they're going to give you a very good indication of who they like.
And when they initiate the conversation, hey, wait till you see this kid. So last week, just watching Bellinger on the backfields, taking ground balls and swinging the bat. Okay. But he's got a couple of years to wait his turn with Adrian Gonzalez situated there. Hassan doubled into the left field corner in his first at-bat. One ball and two strikes. All the Dodger starters are showered out of here and could be on the golf course for all we know. 1, 2, 3. And that'll end the inning. No runs and one hit, 2 left. We'll go to the 8th with the Dodgers up 6-2. Chris Anderson is the new pitcher for the Dodgers. Part of the crowd enjoying this leisurely Saturday afternoon. Anderson, a first-round pick back in 2013. He was the 18th overall pick. And last year at Double and Triple A, he combined for those numbers. As we get ready to go to the 8th inning. So far today, Kenta Maeda with his Dodger debut, no runs and a hit, and if he had any nerves, he certainly didn't show it. Hatcher came in, gave up a run, and actually 2 runs, one of them earned. 1 base hit. Avilan, 1 hit, 2 strikeouts in an inning. Jamie Wright, 41 years of age, turned in a perfect inning and needed 9 pitches. So Anderson delivers a strike to Joaquin Arias, the former Giant. Jose De Leon, no runs, 2 hits in 2 innings. Of course, the Dodgers have seen plenty of Arias over the years when he played with the Giants. Arias came up with the Rangers. And he promptly bangs a base hit into right field. Was with the Giants 2012, 13, 14, and 15.
Kind of a fill-in player. He can run a little bit. For Anderson last year, he was part of the Double-A All-Star team. And in his brief career, it's over 3 seasons, he has averaged just about a strikeout per inning.
This is Zach Bornstein stepping in. Zach from suburban Chicago. Born in Arlington Heights, lives in Buffalo Grove.
Which is right next to Wheeling.
Okay.
I lived in Buffalo Grove for
Did
a
you?
brief period of time. Till they kicked me out.
Well, that's when they had nothing but day games. And so you were
When
out.
it was real baseball. How fitting was it the first game that they're trying to go under lights at Wrigley Field? It rained the game out.
Yeah. The baseball
guy said, no, it's not supposed to happen, at least not on time.
Zach was a 23rd round pick of the Angels back in 2011. Went to Eastern Illinois. Three balls and 2 strikes. With Arias, a leisurely lead at first, being held on by Cody Bellinger. Well, the Diamondbacks, they have 8 different uniform combinations this season.
When Charlie Finley had the A's, and it began in Kansas City, and it was with the white shoes, it was and different color hats,
the gold and the green,
and the coaches wore the white caps. Players only rated the green. There were green sleeves. There were gold sleeves. There were white sanitary socks. There were gold sanitary socks. Wedding gown white, Fort Knox gold, and Pacific Ocean misty green uniforms.
You know, as you well know, I'm not a fashion plate. But if you're going to describe a color scheme for Major League Baseball, wedding gown white.
Wedding gown white, Fort Knox gold, and Pacific Ocean misty green. You never met Charlie, did you?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I know he's one of your all-time faves.
Almost.
Orenstein takes a call, strike 3. He was, if nothing else, flamboyant. Comma, or is that a period?
No, no, it's exclamation mark, actually.
He must have been a tough boss. You just won't go there, will you?
The Clydesdale horses are just kind of dragging me out. We lost a game in Baltimore once. Thanks for getting me started.
Okay.
The game's over, going to the locker room. There were 25 chairs in a circle. Now, this is as we're coming off. Just lost in uniform. 25 chairs in a circle. He was standing in the middle of the circle. We were told to be seated. And then he commenced to chew out the entire club. Unique.
Mm-hmm.
And in other moments, he was one of the kindest gentlemen that you could ever run across.
But he had his moments, did he?
Couple. One of the favors was the pneumatic bunny that he had in Kansas City. Umpire behind home plate would step on a button, and this pneumatically operated rabbit would open up trap doors. The rabbit was molded out of clay or whatever it was, and it held a basket up above its head that had the baseballs of the home plate umpire to replenish the baseballs. Well, when they moved to Oakland, Charlie also packed up the rabbit and that system, but it was broken in transit and it didn't work. So Charlie, not want to miss any opportunity for press, held a funeral for the rabbit.
6-4, but not 3. Reinheimer. The force out. Those with the Yankees. George. The Yankees got lathered like 19-1 or something. And he apologized. The newspaper, the Yankees had this big electronic board out in front of Yankee Stadium. And as the fans were walking in the next day, players had already seen it as well. We apologize. That went over well in the clubhouse.
Yeah. Ray Kroc did the same thing when he owned the San Diego Padres. Took over the microphone and the PA system and apologized to the people and said it was a bad game and bad team.
Well, 1 out of 2 is understandable.
That didn't go over real well.
No.
At least not in the locker room.
Jake Lamb, about the only starter still in the game.
Yeah, he must have really made Chip Hale mad.
He's 0 for 3 with 3 punch-outs.
And still in there.
Yeah. The fellow named Domingo Leyba is on deck.
Okay.
Just the facts, ma'am. On 1 and 2, Lamb holds off and it's 2 and 2. Here's Anderson delivery. And Jake Lamb, he'd rather go home now. 0 for 4 today and 4 strikeouts.
A little late to get thrown.
A week ahead for the Dodgers. And we'll be back with you tomorrow. High noon. LA time with the Giants. Jeff Samardzija going for San Francisco, and Zach Lee hoping for a shot at that vacant number 5 spot in the rotation. New pitcher for the Diamondbacks as we go to the bottom half of the 8th inning. Here's Rick Honeycutt, Dave Roberts, and there's the new pitcher, Jake Barrett, a Phoenix native. And here's Rob Segedin leading it off. Segedin came over from the Yankees. The deal that sent little Ronald Torreyes to New York. Boy, Torreyes bounced around like a pinball last year. To the Dodgers, then he was gone, then he was somewhere else, then he came back to the Dodgers, then he was sent to the Yankees. Here comes the 1-1, and low and outside, 2-1. Segedin, as you see, is a big, powerful fella. And a shot to center field, way back. Brito going back to the wall, and it is gone. A home run. Rob Segedin, 2 at-bats this afternoon, 2 home runs. And it is 7-2. Well, he is big, and he is powerful.
Finally came into the game, hit their 2-run home run down the left field line in the 6th inning, and hits this one to straightaway center field where it's 410 feet. Starts with the hands high, brings him down right at the top of the strike zone, stays right on the ball, and hits through the ball. I mean, that is deceiving as far as the power. But boy, that's a good afternoon. 2 at-bats and 2 home runs.
6'2", 220, and 2 home runs. Well, that certainly opens some eyes, doesn't it? This is Kyle Farmer. Pinch hitting for Zaraga. And was that catch made? Oh, indeed it was.
Spring training play. You're trying to impress. Boy, this is just pure athleticism. Look at how long he runs. He glares, just glances at the fence. And a terrific catch. Oh, did he go a long way.
And he, in his next game, will probably have a name on the back of his jersey.
He's earned it.
Yes. So that's 1 out. And Culberson, who doubled in his last at-bat, swings and misses. So the Dodgers with a 7-2 lead. And some positive storylines indeed for the Dodgers. And you got your first look this afternoon at Rob Segedin with 2 home runs. A line drive shot down the left field line in the 6th. And a shot to straightaway center here in the 8th.
Dodgers now have homered in each of the 3 games that they have played.
12 hits this afternoon, 10 hits yesterday, and a dozen hits on Thursday. Still quite a few of the 13,122 that came into the ballpark still here.
One guy wishes he wasn't. Jake Lamb.
0 for 4 and 4 punch-outs.
How you doing?
What's it to you? And a 45-minute drive back to Talking Stick, and I suspect he'll be talking to himself.
There won't be too much talking going on. And if he's on the bus, he's a guy that you leave him alone. If he wants to come up and say hello or how you doing or I need a friend, fine. Other than that, leave him alone.
3-2. Culberson to right field. Guerrero is there. Gabriel Guerrero. And now Rico Noel. Rico Noel's out of Lawton, Oklahoma. He's had 15 games in the major leagues with the Yankees in 2015. Originally a 5th-round pick of the Padres in 2010. Up and in. 1 ball, 1 strike. Two out in the bottom of the 8th. And nobody warming in the Dodger bullpen, so it looks like Chris Anderson will pitch a 2nd inning of relief. Jose De Leon had 2 solid innings, 4 strikeouts, gave up a couple of hits. Kenta Maeda, Dodger debut, terrific. Rob Segedin, 2 home runs. Those will be the headlines out of this game today. Two balls, 2 strikes, 2 out. 3-2. Grounded to 3rd. Yeah, that's going to do it. But what a day for young Rob Segedin. 2 home runs today. 1 in the 6th and 1 in the 8th. And the Dodgers lead it 7-2. Straightaway center and gone. go to the ninth inning. And these folks are getting their money's worth. Dodgers in a 7-2 shellacking of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Well, Dave Roberts and Rick Honeycutt, and their Dodgers with a 5-run lead. Domingo Leyba. Chris Anderson beginning his second inning of relief. Into left field, where Trace Thompson is there, and that's the first out of the ninth. Gabriel Guerrero coming up.
Yeah, Gabby yesterday hit a home run, and I mean a monstrous home run. I saw the highlight on the local news show, and if he bears a resemblance of another Guerrero, yeah, he's the nephew of Vladimir Guerrero. And he comes to home plate just like his uncle. He comes there, he commences the hack. And figures, talk about that, and he takes the first pitch. But he looks just like Vladimir.
Yeah. But unlike Vladimir, he wears batting gloves. Oh, a nice diving stop at third by Segedin. Oh, what a day for Rob Segedin, huh?
Does it with the bat, does it with the leather. Either way, Guerrero thought he was safe. Did not use the replay in spring training. How about this for an afternoon? That looked like a sure base hit. Bobbles the ball, juggles it, throws in time. At least the ruling. Guerrero made safe. The umpires hit out.
Popped off to the left and out of play. Nothing in one. Socrates Brito. It takes some ingenuity to name your son Socrates. Meanwhile, Chris Anderson is one strike away from putting an end to this game. Dodgers with a run in the first, a run in the second. 4 in the 6th, 1 in the 8th. Have beaten the Arizona Diamondbacks 7-2. For the Dodgers, 7 runs, 12 hits, and 3 errors. The Diamondbacks, 2 runs, 6 hits, and no errors. On a day in which Rob Segedin hit 2 home runs. Kenta Maeda in his debut with the Dodgers, no runs and 1 base hit. And that is a wrap for us. 7-2 the final. Be sure to join us tomorrow at high noon Pacific time. Spring training continues as the Dodgers and the Giants will have at it over in Scottsdale on Sportsnet LA. Charlie Steiner, Rick Monday, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.